series, Art as Intervention in Jewish Cultural History. As our colleague Eric de Bruyne is ill, I'm certainly not a professionally adequate substitute for him as a literary scholar, but I'm nevertheless pleased to be able to say a few introductory words here in his place. So I'm very pleased to present you today two speakers as the next presenters of our lecture series, Tal Dekel and Benjamin Samain. Tal Dekel is an art historian, curator, and activist. She's born in the United States, as far as I understood, studied from 1993 to 1998 art history at the Tel Aviv University, where she also received her PhD in 2003. Her research focuses on feminist theories and gendered aspects of modern and contemporary art, especially within Israeli art. Her research focuses also on issues of visual culture, analyzing an interrelation with race, class, gender, sexuality, and nationality, while using feminist theories and transnationalism. Her author's books are Gendered, Art and Feminist Theory, Cambridge Scholars Publishing, Transnational Identities, Woman, Art and Migration in Contemporary Israel, in Wayne State University Press, and Critical Looks at Ageism and Gender in Israeli Art at the Open Universities published. She also co-edited two volumes titled The Monk and the Lion, Contemporary Ethiopian Visual Art in Israel, and Creating Change, Art and Activism in Israel, two volumes, I think, that are certainly close related to today's lecture. Her recent research revolves around case studies of women immigrants from the former Soviet Union, Ethiopia, and Philippines in Israel. Dekel is currently head of the Visual Literacy Studies and the Curatorial Studies at Kibbutzim College. She previously was head of the Gender Studies Forum at Tel Aviv University. 2020, she received the award Heart at East for contribution to the art and culture in Israel society. When Susanne Zepp asked Tal Dekel to give a lecture in this lecture series, Tal immediately and warmly suggested Benjamin Samain. Benjamin Samain, the second speaker this evening, is an artist from Tel Aviv. As I understand, Benjamin Samain has been working with Tal Dekel for quite some time. Although Ethiopian art is currently very popular in Israel, it was apparently extremely difficult for the initiator of this lecture series, Professor Susanne Zepp, to find competent speakers for this topic. And I am not one of these. I can explain this later. Therefore, I would now cordially ask Tal Dekel to introduce her colleague for us, and once again, herself. And later, we will very much looking forward to both of your presentations, one after the other, I understood. So Tal Dekel, welcome at the floor.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon to all here and on live streaming. It's a pleasure to be here, and I would like to please start by thanking a few people. Foremost, Professor Susanne Zepp, the organizer of this wonderful series, and the Selma Zentrums for intervention in the arts in the Freie Universität here in Berlin, and of course, Professor Kirsten Schör for your kind introduction. Thank you so much, and thank you all for having us me and Benjamin to give this talk today about visual activism for social change, Jewish artists of Ethiopian descent in contemporary Israel. And I would like to also thank Benjamin, my colleague and partner in this project. Thank you so much, Benjamin. So, Israeli Jewish Ethiopian status has undergone deep-seated changes in the last decade, as evident in visual representations created by contemporary Black artists living in Israel today. In recent years, a new generation of Ethiopian Israeli artists has revitalized local art in Israel and engendered deep changes in public discourse and the cultural activity. Ethiopian Israelis, who comprise less than 2% of the total Jewish population in our country, suffer multiple forms of oppression, especially for two main reasons. The first, due to their religious status, which I will explain in a few minutes about, and second, given that their visibility as Black Jews stands out in a society that is predominantly white. This talk draws links between events of the past decade and the images of Black Jews produced by Black artists themselves. I will argue that the political awareness of Ethiopian Israeli artists, gendered by long-term social activism, has greatly impacted their artistic production, broadened its diversity, and also contributed a wealth of artworks to the Israeli culture as a whole. The purpose of this talk is advancing the discussion about the ways in which representations of racial minorities in Israel are constructed by the members of the community themselves. This is very important. This approach advances questions of belonging and otherness under the Israeli ethno-national state and thoughts about being Jewish specifically in Israel. The theoretical framework takes intersectional analysis as central tool. Intersectionality, we know, is an approach that studies the intersections between multiple systems of oppression or discrimination directed at non-hegemonic groups and individuals based on their identities and their social backgrounds. So the study is about identity construction processes when taking issues of race, religion, nationality, etc. into consideration. Okay. So Ethiopia has long and close ties with Judaism and the Jewish people. For example, before Christianity has arrived in the country in Ethiopia, about half of the residents of Aksum in the north of Ethiopia were Jews. Many Christians, Ethiopians today, still believe that they are the offsprings of the ancient Israelites. Whereas the Jewish identity of Beta Israel was never questioned while in Ethiopia, the Jewish religious establishment in the state of Israel was hesitant to grant the community recognition. Only in 1973 did the Sephardic chief rabbi Ovadia Yosef declare them to be the descendants of the lost tribe of Dan, a ruling that opened the gates to their immigration into Israel as diasporic Jews. When the Jews in Ethiopia obtained growing awareness of the option to go to their ancient homeland, they notified Israeli delegates of their decision. The two major waves of immigration were Operation Moses in 1984 and Operation Solomon in 1991, as 8,000 and 14,000 Jews, respectively, arrived in the country. Today, the Ethiopian community in Israel numbers about 180,000 people. And just in parentheses, the total population counts just over 9.5 million in the whole country. So, as we know, the modern state of Israel, established in 1948, was declared as the land of the Jewish people and is marked by ethnic nationalism insofar as citizenship is granted only to immigrants who are members of the dominant religion, Judaism. As an integral part of the Zionist ethos, the Jewish component forms a key element in Israel's identity while creating theological, political, and bureaucratic complications regarding the identity definition of some of the country's immigrants wishing to assimilate. This complex situation greatly affects the Ethiopian immigrants, many of whom cannot prove their Judaism to the satisfaction of the Orthodox rabbinical authorities that maintain absolute power over matters of personal status among Israeli Jews in this country. Therefore, members of this community face significant obstacles to satisfactory assimilation and well-being. Still today, the Ethiopian community in Israel, which is, as I said, extremely small, I remind, comprising less than 2% of the country's Jewish citizens, suffer from substantial discrimination. Black African Jews are considered a rare phenomenon as throughout history, well, Western history. Jews were thought to have originated from Europe, Middle East, or Arab countries. Moreover, the skin color of Ethiopian Jews attract high visibility within Israel, otherwise, as I said, white society. And Ethiopian Israelis are subjected to additional difficulties, such as derogatory stereotypes. Another black community in contemporary Israel are the political asylum seekers from Africa, who form also a very, very small group, only 25,000 people from Eritrea, Sudan, Congo, and such. The artworks I will show today capture various aspects of their lives in contemporary Israel. In 2014, Gidon Ageza documented Kesim. Kesim are the religious leaders of the community and the elderly dignitaries of the Ethiopian Jewish community. So he photographed them during the Memorial Day for Ethiopian Jews who perished in Sudan on their heroic way to Israel. In the photograph, the elderly men are garbed in traditional robes that convey their special status. The authority and status of the community's Kesim are a sensitive and painful issues for Ethiopian Israelis. Many within the community are working to counteract the decline in status of the Kesim in Israel that diminishes under the halacha, the Jewish law, which is Western in essence. Even after 30 years of their arrival, sometimes more, in the Holy Land, immigrants from Ethiopia still have a hard time being accepted as equal under the Jewish law, which governs family law and burial practice of Jewish Israelis, as well as in the religious councils and among the Ashkenazi rabbis in Israel. The immigrants from Ethiopia and their descendants now face an unreasonable situation whereby they are forced to prove their Judaism. Some claim that this is no different from the immigrants from other diaspora communities who are required to prove their Judaism, but in fact, Jews from Ethiopia are accorded different treatment. For example, children of Ethiopian descent who are born and raised in Israel discover upon, let's say, their decision to marry, that almost all the religious councils throughout the country do not cater to them, and only few special agencies are authorized to give them marriage licenses as they are assigned a special track for Jews from Ethiopia only, in which a specialist meticulously looks into their family lineage, searching for any insufficiency in their Jewishness. Although not all members of the community consider the marriage and religious, acceptance as the sole challenge or even the main reason for their successful absorption in the country, But still, indeed, it's a lingering challenge and one that casts a heavy cloud on the entire community. The dignitaries whom Ageza photographed reflect the desire to preserve the honor and the authority of the elderly, the Kesim, who are the bearers of ancient knowledge and wisdom. Notably, only Kesim know the ancient language of Ge'ez and read the Orit, the holy script. And these older dignitaries also serve as mediators of their community. In a painting by artist Nirit Takele, 3 black female figures are standing almost naked in a bathing area. The body posture of the figure in the foreground clearly indicates that she is embarrassed of her exposed body and she's trying to cover up her intimate parts, right? So upon their arrival in Israel, many of the Ethiopian Jews were ordered to perform a ceremonial act related to Jewish identity. Since they were not considered real Jews, they had to undergo a conversion process. Adding to that basic insult, very severe one, the well-organized and pre-planned operation executed by Israeli Orthodox rabbinical institution of the conversion required witnesses to the immersion of the ceremonial bath. However, since women are not considered valid witnesses in Judaism, only men can supervise and authorize the conversion process. Thus, Ethiopian women, some very orthodox and modest in terms of bodily praxis, were asked to dip in the ritual bath virtually naked in front of male representatives. Takele testified that she has heard countless stories of women who were traumatized when ordered to appear nearly naked in front of males who are total strangers to them in order to perform the immersion in the water. For thousands of women, trauma from that event lingered for many years to come. To this day, in fact, some Orthodox sectors still refuse to acknowledge the Jews from Ethiopia as real Jews. Although the Orthodox political parties were not able to prevent them from coming to Israel and attaining citizenship, they are able to govern and regulate their personal status in matters such as I explained, marriage. Thus, when Ethiopian Israeli Jews wish to marry, they must confront the rabbinical institution, the sole institution charged with the registration and authorization of marriages, since civic marriage is not offered in the country. When they come to register, the couples must undergo an investigation of their religious background over at least 3 generations, as the entire community is singled out by these religious authorities and automatically suspected of not being Jewish. The whole community is under that stigma. The Ethiopians then have no choice but to convert again to Judaism, although they're total Jews, by dipping in the ritual bath, although they are, as I said, Jewish. If they refuse, they are declined a marriage license. Given this reality, clearly Takele's artwork is reacting to the oppressive practice of differentiating between different kinds of Jews, if you wish, and the Orthodox claims that some Jews are more kosher than others. Seen in this light, Takele's work takes an active stance against the injustice caused to women in the community, also the men, but she's specifically singling the gendered aspect, the double one that has to do with the women, by the religious patriarchy and its discriminatory ruling. So, the next artwork I want to show and share with you would have to do with Depo-Provera, which is a contraceptive drug to prevent pregnancy. So artist Esther Wanda does the work about this, and I will explain. The drug taken as a shot has a lasting effect. It is good for 3 months. Maybe some of you know of it. But also it carries many side effects and health risks. It is typically given to underprivileged women, women of color, poor, uneducated, and historically was used on women in the third world, in catastrophic stricken areas like refugees camps in Cambodia it happened, or to women with intellectual disability. Also typically, those women get the shot without getting a full disclosure of the side effects and do not fully understand or consent to getting it. In Israel, more than 60% of the Jewish women who are getting the shot are from Ethiopia, although I would like to remind the Ethiopian women comprise only 1% of Israel's total Jewish women's population, and they are 60% of the ones who receive this shot. So many of the women who were in transit camps back still in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa, in Gondar, waiting to get Israeli authorities permission to immigrate into Israel, yes, to obtain the legal papers, would be given the precious permission to enter the country only pending that they agree to get the shot. And again, they have all reported that without getting a proper explanation about the severe health side effects of the drug, and I spare you the details of the side effects, some of them are really severe. Some people within the Ethiopian community claim that this is a kind of systemic genocide, as the true purpose of giving Ethiopian women this shot is not for their benefit, may it be this or that, but rather to simply reduce the population of Black Ethiopians in Israel. The next artwork still deals with the same subject. It is brilliantly made by my colleague, Benjamin, who will elaborate about it himself in a few minutes in his presentation, but I just wanted to say that he also talks about this exact same issue. So it's just a preview. Since the summer of 2015, representations of clashes between citizens of Ethiopian descent and Israeli police have been added to the artistic repertoire. In that year, many members of the community took to the streets in Israeli cities to protest their ongoing discrimination and especially police violence directed at their youth. The clashes between the Ethiopian Israelis and the police proved, once again, that racism is deeply embedded in Israeli establishment and society, and that encounters between Black and white citizens is fraught with explosive tension. Notably, the clashes coincide with the Baltimore event in the United States and the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement, again, in the United States. The repeated incidents of police violence against Ethiopian Israelis led to a spectrum of artistic representation of this state of affairs, and I brought only this one example, but it's really prolific. So I will explain what we are seeing. It's one of a series of paintings by Dekel that captures Ethiopian Israeli men in such situation, particularly during protests. Here, the work, it's a painting, well, it's untitled, but it's also called Beating of the Israeli Soldier, is from 2015, and it's based on a true incident depicting 3 light-skinned policemen pinning down a young Black man. Dekel addresses the unequal balance of powers between the white representatives of the establishment and the dark-skinned man who was arrested by the police in the street while wearing his army uniform of the Israeli Defense Force. That is, while he was an active serving soldier in the Israeli army. He was arrested under the false accusation that he was stealing a bike. It's a true story, and it was all over the news and like this. There was a video, just, somebody managed to capture real life, so they cannot say that it was not true. So the imbalance is represented in motion as a close elliptical whirlwind from which there is no exit in the eyes of this artist, Nirit Dekel. For many young Black people in Israel, despair and hopelessness in the face of racism and police brutality have undermined their faith in the institutions, as, despite frequent government declaration, very little has been done till this very day to improve their lot, to help them bridge the economic gap or deal with discrimination. As a result, many refrain from involvement in the general society and draw strength from the energies of their own community, thereby adhering to the principles of identity politics and the politics of recognition. Dekel thus critiques hegemonic society, drawing with a steady and balanced hand the asymmetric power relations between representatives of the authority and establishment and ordinary citizens, between different groups of Jews within Israeli society, Blacks and whites. But of course, there is a wealth of, as I said, additional Black artists that address these grave issues. I brought just one. I'm not even going to even go into it in details, just to show, for instance, artist Tal Magos, Stop Police Violence, against the youth from the community. Let's go on and talk about socialization through army service. Another artwork by this artist that we just saw, Tal Magos, is painted and it's called Beta Israel Soldier. It depicts a saluting combat soldier with a flag of Israel in the background, as we see here. He displays an officer's insignia on the shoulder of the uniform and wears a purple beret and vest for his communication equipment and other combat devices. Beautiful picture. Gazing into the distance, he seems intent and focused on his mission. Military service in Israel is a complex experience that offers soldiers a chance to strengthen and empower themselves, provide them with skills and expertise in professional fields. Many see army service preliminary as a rite of passage into Israeliness that breeds courage and the power to protect. During their army service, soldiers undergo a process that leaves them with lifelong impressions and add new dimensions to their identity. This process is positive if they feel that their military service has been meaningful and effective, particularly if they have served in combat and service and experienced male fraternity, bravery, and a chance to contribute to the greater good. Military service can also lead veteran soldiers to desirable jobs in their civilian lives and serve as a means to improve their standing and attaining social mobility. Studies as those conducted by Malka Shabtai seek to emphasize the positive and empowering contributions that the Israeli Defense Force, the IDF, offers young men of Ethiopian descent. Her research emphasizes socialization within the military and the power of Zionist nationalism to improve self-image and heighten a sense of belonging to the army and the state. Yet equally relevant is the flip side of the army service in Israel. Data points to the lower percentage of Ethiopian Israelis offered officer training and high-rank jobs compared to their peers not from that community, 8% versus 14% respectively. Moreover, the higher percentage of Ethiopian Israeli soldiers discharged from the IDF before completing full term of service is approximately 20%, parentheses, versus only 15% of the overall soldier population, and they comprise only 2% of the total Jewish population. So it's very, very high percentagism. And they are at greater risk of being incarcerated in military prison. They are, I would say, 12% of all imprisoned soldiers, but they comprise only 1.5 of the soldiers in the IDF. This data indicates that the Israeli army can be a social stratification mechanism that does not necessarily benefit disadvantaged groups, such as the Ethiopian community. And indeed, the military administration in Israeli society as a whole has given inadequate consideration to the fact that many soldiers of Ethiopian descent end up in prison after disobeying orders and deserting duty, even though they do so just in order to find a paying job outside the army so that they can contribute and support their family economically while still soldiers. Returning to Mago's painting, we may wonder then whether this soldier and many others of Ethiopian descent receive the attention and relevant, culturally sensitive treatment that they need when serving in military duty in the IDF. We may ask whether the tense salute and this sidelong gaze are indication of total faith in the military ethos and Israeli nationalism, or perhaps an invitation to rethink the conditions and position of Ethiopian Israeli soldiers within various Israeli military frameworks. Dealing with the act of migration from Ethiopia through artistic expression enables immigrant artists to contemplate their sense of belonging to the state of Israel and articulate their relationship with Israeli society as a whole. Many Ethiopian Israeli artists have chosen to focus on this issue through the prism of Zionist discourse and practice, including artists such as Tal Magos that we have already met. Another artist is Elsa Tegenye. Tegenye created a video piece that also depicts the Ethiopian Jews' heroic journey through Sudan on their way to Israel. As I said, it's a recurring theme, one that is very much on the community's mind. The 18-minute video describes, I have only still photos, sorry we don't have time to run the whole video. The 18-minute video describes a woman walking in the desert in the midst of an open, vast, extremely dry landscape. And the video, actually filmed in 2020 in Israel, not in Ethiopia on the way from Sudan, refers to the historic trek through Sudan. In order to get to Israel, they had to take the dangerous path through Sudan. Historically, going through Sudan is a very hostile but necessary option that they had to take if they wanted to arrive. And the reason she filmed this still in 2020 suggests to the lingering post-trauma of Ethiopian Jewry from their quest to arrive in Zion. Artist Tekele does not only dwell on the past, but also uses contemporary, political, civic terms in describing her artwork, insisting on reminding the Israeli hegemonic society that the narrative of the Ethiopian Jews has been almost erased in the Israeli context. Everybody knows about the Holocaust, right? It's a Western narrative. Do even people, even the state of Israel, know about the heroic and tragic quest of the Ethiopian community through Sudan and the perish of so many on the way, just in the wish to arrive in Zion? The heroic and tragic narrative of the quest is seldom discussed in mainstream Israeli discourse or in the school textbook and such. Tegenye's artwork seeks to embed the Ethiopian narrative into the Israeli general story of the Jewish people and its long journey to arrive in Zion, and in particular, Jews' heroic act during that difficult journey. So the artist's aim is to insert the historic journey through Sudan and along with it to the narrative of the Ethiopian Jews into the canonical narrative of Zionism, no less. This body of work can be conceived of in relation to Cella Sandoval's theory explored in her book, Methodology of the Oppressed. In that text, Sandoval theorizes effective means of survival and agency for marginalized groups. She has identified a language, so to speak, a rhetoric of resistance to cultural conditions born in the strains of cultural and identity struggles that make global change. Sandoval considers this linguistic methodology to contain the possibility of a new historical moment, a new citizen subject, and a new form of alliance consciousness and politics. Tagenia's political reference articulates such a strategy for coping with the historicity of experience, counteracting the canonical history of the state that erases her and their narrative. Filming herself in the desert, as if she is currently trekking through Sudan on the way to Zion, is Tagenia's way to making a clear, proactive suggestion to restore Black Jews' place into the Zionist national history. Through her video, she offers a subversive means to the call to act against marginalization, erasure, in ways that do not necessarily align with the normative call for civic conduct under the unifying nation state and the Zionist ideology of the Jewish ethno-national state that is currently in Israel. This ideology is not only symbolically erased for this group on the basis of ethnicity, but also marginalizes them on the basis of gender, as the Zionist narrative is predominantly male in essence. This is why I, as a gender researcher, I specifically would like you to also bear in mind the gendered aspect in the intersectional analysis of not only religion and nationality, but also gender. So Tagenia's video art presents the option of maintaining a simultaneous sense of belonging and pride in the resilience and strong cultural, fierce religious faith, alongside the urge to unveil the exclusion from which Ethiopian Jews, and especially the Ethiopian women, are suffering from. The prevalence of gender and race as a societal constructs are, well, unfortunately, all over the world, still prevalent, and it applies in Israel as well, as it flows over into diverse political, economic fields, and even into cultural fields, including the visual arts and material arts. Throughout history, creative women have been pushed into the domestic realm, claiming there are no great women artists such as Michelangelo, Rembrandt, Dürer, Van Gogh, only men. And thus women are excluded from the cultural creativity in the public sphere throughout history up until the modern era, with a few exceptions to the rule. From the perspective of patriarchy, the artistic activity that women perform falls primarily into the category of traditional arts, crafts, which is of merely decorative use. Embroidery, sewing, pottery, weaving belong to the prominent traditional enterprises ascribed to the field. Several Ethiopian Israeli artists have expressed a critical attitude towards this artificial dichotomy, pointing to the mechanisms that construct high art as such and what kinds of arts fail to enter the realm of real art and consider merely decorative. So artist Eden Desta produced an image, which is, again, part of a series of photographs of the artist's mother, in which the protagonist engages in sewing and embroidery, an art form she is engaged in throughout her lifetime. The image captures in a close-up frame that focuses on the piece of traditional white cloth and on the letters of in the Amharic language, written with white paint on the mother's arms, as you can see. The woman holds in her hand a piece of a rich and complex embroidered cloth, and Desta, just like artist Gudai Bitaulin Erez, seeks to combine two aspects in her art: the importance, strength, and centrality of intergenerational traditional knowledge, a gendered aspect of it, as well as critical reflexivity about the richness, depth, and importance of women's craft that undergoes social degradation, considered merely feminine work that is domestic, unimportant, and inferior. So in their art, Desta and Bitaulin Erez, as well as artist Elsa Tegenye, and also works, for instance, Anatnesh Yalo, protest against the devaluating of women's work in patriarchal society. I have one more close-up. Beautiful. Isn't it? Amazing. But rather than using the traditional form of pottery, basket weaving, embroidery, and such in the simple, or I would say original manner, they add contemporary layers that combine respect to the past but also affirmative and confident updated action for the present. Artist Tesfai Tegenye, he also works from a similar stance. His sculptures describe traditional daily life of Jews while still living in Ethiopia. He does that while he is in Israel. But although the beautiful sculptures are wrapped with banana leaves on the external, the interior is made out of the most high-tech materials such as polymeric foam, special metal structures. He's very well knowledged with all the high-tech materials that can be used to sustain his outdoor sculptures that are throughout the country now in public spaces for permanent display. But not only grim and difficult issues are expressed by Ethiopian Israelis artists like Elsa Tegenye with her work that we already saw in the video that she did in the what we saw before in the going through Sudan, the desert. Another piece, I'm sorry, we didn't have time to see the whole video. As I said, it's 18 minutes long, but I will translate. What we see here in Hebrew is Im enet hashki'a az enet hazricha, meaning if there is no sunset, there could never be a sunrise. So that's part of the video. So many turn to express their pride in their heritage and strength of the community, such as artists that depict their grandmothers, the old women that carry tradition and pass it on to the next generation, the youth. Artist Talmago works on not only, he is not the only one, also Hirut Yosef depicts her grandmother, and also we have another one. I have one page missing here, and I will do like this elegantly. Moreover, because one of the typical consequences of immigration, especially within social groups with traditional backgrounds or lower economic status, the young parents who are at the age that they have to go out to work in order to earn a living for the entire family, the young children are often left to be raised by the grandmothers. Thus, the intergenerational bond is very strong, and traditional customs are more strongly preserved within such communities, as in the case of the contemporary Ethiopian Jews living in Israel. So this is one option of celebrating tradition and the strength and the beauty. Another option is works by Dana Yosef. I have only 3 of her works. She paints strong women and girls such as Tahunya Rubel. I don't know if you know Tahunya. Tahunya is an Ethiopian Jew who became a supermodel and is very successful in Israeli media. And actually, she was leading also a few international campaigns. So she's like very famous and beautiful. And, but Dana Yosef also paints other beautiful paintings of strong girls, strong women. And also, I want to just show you briefly works by Elazar Tamano. Elazar Tamano works with coffee, which originates in Ethiopia, and that is the basis of all his painting. He splashes brewed coffee as the basic level, the foundation of the paintings, and then he splashes brewed coffee, and on top of that, he paints his paintings, okay? So I hope that that is, so various African motifs, but also Elazar Tamano works on themes of music. Music that is characterized or used or employed by Ethiopian community as a main means of identity construction process. In a unique series of painting, Tamano depicts musical bands of Ethiopian Israelis that are working now. Here we have the band that is called Strong Black Coffee. That's the name of the band. And now there is another band that is called the KGC Musical Band. And just the two of them, but there are more. And it's important for that to understand that many young Ethiopian Israelis are drawn to American rap and hip-hop music, or to reggae and Rastafarianism, which links Jamaica and Ethiopia, yeah? However, they mostly prefer to listen to local Israeli music created in Israel by young Israelis from the Black community that matches their experience in their own community that is specific for the Ethiopian community. It is an ongoing project of Tamano, which paints those bands while he listens to them. When I interviewed, he said, I'm also listening to the music in my studio while I actually paint them. So when Ethiopian Jews first arrived in Israel and were urged to adopt an Israeli Jewish national identity, they nonetheless also took up global consumption of music, which has contributed to their multi-layered identity. Hip-hop culture and rap music became very popular among the Black youth in Israel, expressing the process through which they construct a transnational identity. Hip-hop is a means of expressing identification with the experience of exclusion and racism, much like elsewhere in the world. This aligns with the Black Atlantic approach, led by scholars such as Stuart Hall, Paul Gilroy, which draw identity from and pride in historical figures such as Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, but also sees in music a chance to connect with other communities of the African diaspora, and thus to reduce the isolation felt by Blacks in predominantly white society. This is not to propose that the existence of an essentialist link, a shared African origin of sort or so, among members of the Black diaspora, rather to point to the symbolic resource that can help young Ethiopian Israel mobilize resistance, assertiveness, and the creativity to build a sense of community, pride, belonging. Tamano's paintings show that young Ethiopian Israelis' interest in this music provides them with the cultural capital they need in order to construct a strong and confident identity within Israeli society. Additional artists take pride in their heritage, and they take it more into, I would say, futuristic paths. For instance, artist Eden Yelma. I don't know if you know or understand what we're seeing. Usually, this is if it was only tradition or traditional object, it would be a weaved basket inside injera, kind of pita bread, okay? But it is a kind of a music instrument, an electronic scratching for DJs. Or Hirut Yosef, who works on Mimi, And I would especially like to introduce you to Rina Ingedau. She has a more declined futuristic inclination, and especially evident in her work. She uses the African heritage while incorporating futuristic elements into what I can relate or connect to Afrofuturism. Afrofuturism is a well-known cultural aesthetic philosophy of science, as well as a contemporary cultural perspective, critical perspective, that explores the intersection of African diaspora culture with science and technology. Afrofuturism addresses themes and concerns of the African diaspora through technoculture and speculative fiction, encompassing a range of media and artists with a shared interest in envisioning Black futures that stem from Afro-diasporic experiences. While Afrofuturism is most commonly associated with science fiction, it can also be expressed by other genres such as alternative history, magic realism, and so on. The term was coined in 1993 by Mark Derry, an American cultural critic, and explored by Black artists and ever since the 1990s till this very day. And here we see a really wonderful usage of Afrofuturism through visual culture. That is, these works are digital paintings that are based on photographic images that the artist herself took and then worked them out in digital action. Conclusion. A wide variety of artworks reflect the individual and collective experience of Jews from the Ethiopian community in Israel. This relatively small collection of artworks that I have managed to show you today in this short time we had together demonstrates the ways in which these artists conceive their lives in Israel and the degree of belonging that they feel to the place to which they have arrived. It examines this question by focusing the discussion on the concept of home within the politics of domesticity and ideology of nationhood and citizenship. I argued that the artists occupy a simultaneous position, feeling oppressed and marginalized subjects on the one hand, and powerful and enhanced agents on the other, as they express an urgent call and plea to belong, together with a highly critical stance and a clear protest about the marginalization they undergo. This analysis reveals that Ethiopian Israeli Jews have not one, but rather various hybrid and hyphenated identities. By drawing on critiques that undermine the possibility of fixing subjects with pre-assigned identities, be they religious, gendered, racial, national, or other, I argued that all artists experience different kinds of affiliation depending on their diverse stories, that is, place of residence, educational opportunities, gender, and so on. So this talk has provided, I hope, a platform through which we can understand the ways in which the members of the community present, articulate, and define their own identities, rather than having an outsider define it for them. Moreover, using art in order to do so is a novel way to discuss and communicate this subject in a way that enables them to do so in a first-of-its-kind, activist, and nuanced manner. Hence, I suggest that when dealing with images of Black Jews in Israel, we move beyond the binary dichotomies, Black versus white, nationalist versus individualist, domestic versus public, career versus leisure. It is in this spirit that African-American activist Bell Hooks writes in her famous text titled Black Looks, Race and Representations, I quote, "For those of us who dare to desire differently, who seek to look away from the conventional ways of seeing blackness, the issue of race and representation is not just a question of critiquing the status quo. It is also about transforming the image, creating alternatives, asking ourselves questions about what types of images subverse, pose critical alternatives, and transforms our worldviews and move us away from dualistic thinking, end of quote, of bell hooks. Indeed, a fresh reading of images of Ethiopian Israeli Jewish citizens created and exhibited in the Israeli art world by Ethiopians themselves offers an opportunity to see the dawn of a new Jewishness in Israel. Thank you. Thank you. So it's now my great pleasure to introduce my colleague, Benjamin Samain. Benjamin Samain is a 42-year-old artist from Tel Aviv, Israel, who embraces multidisciplinary approach in his creative endeavors. Operating under the moniker Spit of God, or Yerika Shel Elohim in the Hebrew language, he embodies his art within a distinct persona, as we will see in a second. It is a hospital uniform and a straitjacket of sorts, if you will, a kind of a shirt, which enables him to unveil his true self, for it is through this unconventional atelier that his raw honesty will actually, it can come and shine forth. So his artistic creations, we will see some of them here today, dive into the heart of pressing social issues that often find themselves relegated to the periphery of public discourse. And with meticulous research and keen spatial observation, he independently crafts works that mirror those issues back onto society, aspiring to promote positive change and rectify its flaws. So I make it short, not to be so formal, because I just wanted to say that my dear colleague Benjamin is a really, really good artist, and he has had many exhibitions throughout Israel over the years. And the one that we saw in my presentation will also be, I think, in his presentation in a moment. And then we can talk after his presentation if you have some questions. So Benjamin, please. And I will ask the help of...
לא, את התרגום, אחרי שאני...
Yes, of course, of course.
אז תישארי פה בסדר, זה יהיה זריז.
Just take your picture, no problem. Just a sec, sorry. So.
You can switch here. Switch.
Okay.
Okay, good evening. I'm very excited to be here. So Ticking Black Bomb was the winning artwork for the prize of Art in Public Space, a prize which is guaranteed by Avram Mostel and designed to be hung on a promoted building in the center city of Tel Aviv for 6 months. In the back.
You need to translate what it says?
Yes.
It says, you are excused of holding a ticking bomb in your uterus. This is the Dekel issue of... Yeah?
In the background of the work, allegations of intentional action by establishment to reduce childbirth among Ethiopian women by providing Depo-Provera injection, which have a serious side effects. Various investigations on the subject have produced contradictory findings, including the state comptroller's examination which found no avoidance of a national policy, but the harsh feeling of racism and discrimination among Ethiopian Israeli surrounding this affair. We are expressed from 2002 to the present, including allegations of racism exist openly and covertly, so covert that the lives of children are interrupted even before their parents planned on having them. Ethiopians are suspicious even before they are born, and an Ethiopian mother in terms of establishment is a ticking black bomb, which at any moment might explode. We, the younger generation, are also ticking bomb. The rejection, the police, the education system, and the law have become fuel for us, with which we are ready to explode. The next artwork, it's called Kiddush Hashem, Praise the Lord. And I was so surprised to see my grandfather in a Tal presentation, the image of a casing.
Your grandfather is a case?
Yes.
Casing
Casing in Hebrew, priests. Were the spiritual leaders and religious authority of Beta Israel, and those who conducted all religious ceremonies in Ethiopia. While immigrating to Israel, the rabbinate forced them into a conversion forces and denied their rights to hold religious ceremonies. When I get married, I would like my grandfather, who was a case, to marry me. But as far as the state and the rabbinate is concerned, he is not allowed to do this, to do so. Laying tefillin is a mitzvah that is not written in the Torah, but begun from the oral Torah, and did not arrive in Ethiopia. So the Kesim do not place tefillin, but rather follow the writing mitzvah strictly. In 1977, the high priest Bran Baruch tearfully went through the conversation process, after which he neither eater nor drank until he died. Rest his soul. There are things you can delete, but we can't.
Oh, yeah, that's an important point.
Yes.
So just a sec. Benjamin just asked me to inform that this painting, which is actually large, I've seen it in actuality in the exhibition, is all made with pencil. And at the far left bottom, there is a eraser. And the community or visitors to the show took part in erasing parts of it. And also, this is not really conveyed very well in the reproduction. The eyes are not hollow, but rather they have mirrors. So actually, when we look at the painting, in reality, it reflects ourselves, the viewers, looking at the case, which is actually hanging by his throat and actually as if totally executed. Exactly, because if they are not taking affirmative action, even just us as side viewers, if we do not act, we are like accomplices. Thank you. This is a very important point.
The butcher. In 2016, Rabbi Eliyahu Asulin, a senior mohel who authorized circumcision, was documented in hidden cameras closing a deal with a reporter posing as a student. As part of the exchange, he told him that for $11,000, he would qualify him as a mohel in an accelerated course where he would practice on Ethiopian, claiming they are like a cannon fodder. They don't understand anything. In creating the work, I use my own blood. And again, there's something you can delete, but we can.
So maybe I could elaborate again or just explain that this is also based on a true story that was just running in the internet, that in candid camera. They did not know that they were filmed as a registered mohel that does the circumcision, told to a young practicing mohel, you know, you can do it on Ethiopian babies. They don't understand anything, the community. You can just, you know, make your mistakes. They're, you know, it's okay.
I will fix it.
Yeah.
The next artwork called Masterpiece. This piece is a masterpiece. The white canvas that has a black marker pen attached to it as an object for the audience to use. Here are the words that I have written. The left is before and the right is after. I believe each of us is a piece of creation. I believe that every person deserves equal opportunity. I believe in the human heart. I believe in our ability to change. I believe that when you realize black is not bad, we will become not just a piece of creation, but a masterpiece. So take the marker and add some black for all of our sakes. אני רוצה להגיד שאפילו שעבר זמן מאז שביצעתי את העבודות, אפילו זה עדיין קשה לי, כאילו.
Yes, we can feel that. Thank you so much for sharing. Benjamin just said that although there has been more than 5 or 6 years actually since those works, it's a little bit overwhelming to speak about them in such a honorable getting together, so it's not so easy.
Black in white space. Helium balloon inside cage made of anti-bird spikes. That's how a black person feels when they are in a white space. Now look around. Maybe it's how I feel right now. But no, I don't feel like that.
You're in good confidence. Do you want to show the video?
Yes.
Maybe we can ask for your kind help again, please.
זה משהו שהייתי צריך להגיד אולי.
No, on the contrary. Thank you for sharing that. It's actually...
טל, אני צריך שתדבר על
Okay, do you want to show the first one?
Yes.
Or the second? The first one has no audio, so it speaks for itself?
יש אודיו, כן, אבל צריך להסביר שזה על רקע זה שהרבה אתיופים ויותר משוגעים ביחס לישראלים שנמצאים.
Okay, so just before we will see it, Benjamin wanted to convey that just as I explained about the soldiers who have special culturally sensitive problems within the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, in the jurisdictional system in Israel also, we see it a lot, not in the army, but especially we can see it in mental institutions. Many mentally challenged people from the community are in Israeli such institutions, and way beyond their percentage. I'm sorry, I don't know the exact percentage, a very high percentage as opposed to their percentage. Real, yes, and many of them against their will, actually. And they just say that they're like incompetent, they do not understand, and they force them into staying in those mental institutions. Thank you. The first or the second one?
The
The first one or the second?
first one.
First.
Can you close the light? Can you turn off the light? In the end, I find myself when I got lost.
And it's about the mental institution situation of the community members in Israel today. That's why this straitjacket, and that's his artistic persona when he walks around in performances and in exhibitions. So Benjamin always has this straitjacket on him because it's an activist cry out for us as an Israeli society to try and attend to this very, very severe problem, because we do not have strong like lawyers that can fight for them, and most of the people are starting now to be lawyers and judges, but it's an emerging, like the next generation is just coming up, so yeah. And the next video?
It's Kataba.
Yes?
Yes.
It's actually
אני חושב שאנחנו חייבים תמיד לפעול בכמה מישורים, אבל לאומנות יש משהו שהוא יושב גם על אוזניים ערלות. גם הבן אדם הכי גזען שיראה דבר כזה וישמע את הסיפור הזה.
So it's just, we're not going to see the whole video. It's actually a TV broadcast with Benjamin, because he's very famous in Israel. This is where it was actually for 6 months in the most central, thank you, place in Israel. I just wanted you to feel the flair that the young emerging 1.5 or second generation of young Ethiopian artists in Israel are very activist. They are not as silent and polite like their parents, which have arrived 30, 35, 40 years ago since Operation Moses in 1984 and then 1991, and they speak their mind about all these burning issues that have to be corrected in Israel today. So I think I will stop here, if it's okay with you, Benjamin, and everybody else, because we're almost at the end of our time, and maybe there is one or two questions that can be asked. I just wanted to show Kan 11, this kind of channel is like the most important channel in Israel. It's the national channel of Israeli broadcasting. So thank you. Please, I don't know how to stop. There must be a button, but I don't know which. Huh? Ta-da! Thank you. Sorry. So, thank you very much. Benjamin, please come join me. And if somebody has a question for me or for Benjamin, we will be very happy to answer. Or we know that we have a problem of live streaming. We cannot listen to the questions, unfortunately, back home. So we apologize for that. But maybe, Professor Shor, you want to close, or we're almost at the end of our time, so.
First of all, let me thank you very, very much for this impressive lesson for us, not just a speech. So.
Thank you so much for having us and for letting us have this opportunity to talk about this important issue.
So, is there anybody with questions? Micro is there, over there. Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for this really brilliant insight into an art scene of Black Jewish artists I didn't have a clue of, I have to admit. So thank you very much to both of you. And my question actually was a little bit answered already now in the last film, because I was interested in the reception of these artist community within Israel and beyond. But maybe you can go on and elaborate a little bit more on this topic of how these artists are seen within Israel particularly, and how these political claims are kind of, find their ears in the politics.
I will explain. Yes, thank you very much for this question. Maybe, Benjamin, you would like to see how you feel about it. Do you feel like there is a good reception, Kabbalah, of your art, the other Black community artists in Israel today, or not so much? Sometimes yes. What do you feel about this?
אני רוצה להגיד בעברית.
Oh, he prefers to say in Hebrew, and then I will translate.
אני קופרייטר, בגלל זה חשוב לי להגיד את המילים כמו שצריך, ואם אני לא דובר את השפה, אז...
Perfect.
באמנות שלי לא חשוב לי שיהיה יפה. חשוב לי שאנשים יראו, ואחרי זה ילכו וידברו על זה. אז אני חושב שאני לא צריך שיקבלו. אני נכנס בדלת האחורית, והם חייבים לדבר על זה, כי זה משהו שקשה לשכוח.
Thank you. So personally, he feels that for his kind of art, it's really important for him not to wait for acceptance, but to just say what he feels that is important to be at this moment. And he does say that he feels that his art is very straightforward. As we saw, it's actually quite difficult to even look at certain points. And he really intensely believes that it makes an impact and so forth. It's strong and it's effective. As a researcher, maybe I can add also my perspective and also my humble perspective, because I'm not an Ethiopian descendant, but I was listening to Benjamin and all the others and interviewed them and studied it to the best of my ability, because I'm not a specialist on Ethiopian Jews, but rather on immigration into Israel with different communities. So this is only one chapter. I feel like I wanted to position myself within the framework of this research, and to humbly say that as a researcher, I see that it is still very under attended to. I mean, this kind of work of Benjamin and other friends that we have seen in my PowerPoint presentation has not yet received a major exhibition in any major institution in Israel today. It is in peripheral exhibitions, and some of them are not even ever had been exhibited anywhere, and it's just because I try to research and find them. I go into studios of the artists. Some of them, of those works we have seen, were actually not yet exhibited ever. So it's still an issue, and it's still a challenge. We are trying to promote books, catalogs, exhibitions throughout the country, and not me so much as the community itself, and I'm just observing and being a supportive of their community. It is important for me to say that these are self-endeavored efforts of the community itself, and I'm observing and maybe communicating it still to the larger public. Hopefully, I will be also taken out, no need anymore, and they can do it all on themselves very soon.
I hope so.
Yes? Anything else? We would love to take some more questions. Please come join me.
Yeah, thank you so much for showing us all this material from the art world. I would have more a question in regard to popular culture, and I don't know if you have watched it, like the series Nefsu or Red Sea Diving Resort. What do you think about this representation of Ethiopian Jews in Israel in popular culture, if you watched it?
So I will just explain again. בתרבות פופולרית, כמו בטלוויזיה, סדרות כמו נפסו, וזה, מה אתה חושב על תרבות שהיא לא נגיד אומנות, אבל נגיד אפילו עיצוב, קמפיינים, טלוויזיה, מוזיקה. Maybe you can try and say in English or you prefer in Hebrew.
אני לא הבנתי את השאלה. מה אני אומר על זה?
כן.
שעושים, מכניסים תרבות?
כן. אתה חושב שזה אמיתי, זה אותנטי, זה מסביר טוב?
אני לא יודע לענות על השאלה הזאת, אבל אני חושב שזה טוב, זה בסדר, כן.
כן. So he says it's complicated and it's not straightforward this way or the other. Some of the works in popular culture, if I may say, if I can convey what you mean, is that Nepso and stuff like that. Some of them you do not know. It's a TV series made by an Ethiopian Israeli, and I think it has 3 seasons already. Yes, I think. And it conveys his life with he married an Israeli white wife. So some of them are really good, and it's good to have anything out there, but sometimes...
אבל נקודה מצחיקה, שהוא משחק פרסומאי, אבל אין אף אחד פרסומאי קריאיטיב בתעשייה האתיופית.
Oh, yeah, this is a good point. Thank you so much. In this Nebso series, his character is that he's a, now I don't know the word.
A creative, a copywriter,
Art director, copywriter in the advertisement industry. But in fact, he is not. And we do not have yet Israeli, Ethiopian copywriters, designers in mainstream, in the main. And Benjamin is. This is also, you know, to be an artist is not a very good métier, not a lot of money to be earned. So his real day job, he's a copywriter and a designer in the industry, but in the high levels, very famous, very important, very the ones who produce what we see in television, in the billboards, in the highways, everything. There are still in Israel no Israeli Ethiopian copywriters, and so it's still difficult. It's complicated, huh? Yes, yes. Hopefully soon. You're going to be it.
Yes, I hope so.
Okay.
So if there are no more questions, thank you again, both of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And thank you everybody for coming, and I wish you a nice way home.